You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Global Trade This Week, a all Mountain Time. Pete and Doug, even Keenan, right? We're all on Mountain Time this week, although we're not all in the same state. Doug is in Colorado, I believe. Yeah.
No, I'm Pacific Time. It's an hour earlier. I'm out in the great city of Fresno, California.
All right. Well, I screwed that up. But I'm in Salt Lake, and Doug is in California, so kind of West Coast this week, I suppose, for both of us. But an exciting week of travel and adventure, Doug, for the dynamic duo here.
Yeah. So normally we talk about weather, and we said we wouldn't, and I'm not going to. So I'm going to speak about cows, right? A couple of things. Central Valley, there is a ton of cows here. One, I just heard this yesterday on some farm report when I was driving in. 20% of all the cows in the United States live in California. And it is, well, I'm not going to say it because we said we wouldn't do it. They're kind of badasses. They just hang out outside all the time. And it has the exposure. I'm trying to tell this story, Pete, without talking about weather. So anyway, cows are badasses, and there's a lot of them here, and this is big business. Whether you're powdering milk, selling it, butter, cheese, you name it. I mean, there's a lot of cows out in the Central Valley of California.
I'm always, a little surprised, I suppose, at the amount of agriculture in California between, almond, citrus, tons and tons of livestock north of San Francisco, maybe would be a good place to look at it.
Yeah. No, man, it's all wine. It's like Bakersfield, and I barely knew where these cities were before I started this job out here, but Bakersfield up to like Sacramento, for lack of a better term, maybe a little bit south. If you look at a map, this is just me and elementary geography. But if you look like San Francisco Bay, that's where the water came in. And then if you look at the entire San Joaquin Valley, and then you got the Sierra Nevadas just to the east, that was a lake, gigantic lake, million years ago or whatever. If you just look at it, a topography map, you can definitely see that's where the water was in the valley. But agriculture is big time out here. Cows, big time out here. And it's kind of cool. It's a learning experience for me for sure.
Well, the explosion of almond milk has required an expansion of almond farming. So you have all of that out in California.
Yeah.
And then, American avocados, what's left of it, because most of it, I guess, is Mexican. But yeah, it's massive. I don't think people understand that's quite such a large part of California's economy, but I can feel people falling asleep while we do farm talk, Doug.
Yeah.
I could do it all morning, but they.
It's funny. This is the only place in California where you can see a pickup truck and a gun rack in the back. So
yeah, come to New Hampshire, buddy. There's plenty of that. Where Yeah.
Nice.
But anyway, another exciting episode of Global Trade this week, and because I introduced the show, that means Doug gets to go first with his first topic. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. So this one caught my attention yesterday. So both of my topics are related to mergers and acquisitions, right? The first one is, hey, things aren't going the way they planned. The second one just happened, and I'll get that to my second topic that I think will probably play out, and I'll explain why. But the first one, Forward Air, Omni Logistics, that came about in January, and the trials and tribulations of that thing just having difficulty coming together. I don't know if you saw last week, but they're laying off 150 employees. And the interesting thing is a lot of salespeople. So you and I probably know a couple of those people that are impacted, some C-suite type of people. And it's just one thing after another. So I did a little research on this. And here's a couple of things, right? Is ideally it was cost savings, the reason of the acquisition. Cost savings, expanded network footprint, direct access to clients. And really what transpired is that Omni had a hell of a lot of debt. integration harder than anticipated, which is always the case, right? Always seems easier than it is. And then some of the objectives, what I would call soft objectives, which are really hard to quantify, which were accelerate strategy and reshape the industry. Sounds like buzzwords that some salespeople would use, right? It's just like, well, what does that actually mean? I think it was a little nebulous, right? So this is the bottom line, Pete. I have found, right, it's a pretty good gig to provide services to service providers. And that's exactly what Forward Air's core business was, right? They provided the line haul for a lot of expedited freight and a lot of freight forwarders. And I always loved it as a service provider, is that when you're providing services to service providers, they kind of get it. They get the problems that happen. So you have a conversation, you're like, here's what happened. Yeah, I kind of get it. And they're the ones that are dealing front and center with the customer, right? Who may not understand why. And so the challenge is that Forward Air was providing services to service providers. Omni Logistics was a direct forward facing to clients. And so I think there was a mixed message, this is my opinion, of clients saying, are you going to steal my customers? Why would I give you freight to a customer that I have a relationship? And it just kind of got confusing. So conceptually, it sounds good, but they were on opposite sides of the service offering. Now, Omni did have some line haul that they sold and everything else, but the forward-facing nature of the company and the back support that Forward Air provided just was kind of weird. It just didn't mesh, and it was, in my opinion, it was confusing to the marketplace. And so people contracted as investors, and you're like, what's going on here? And then the debt. And then the last thing, Pete, I'll say about this one, and I didn't realize this, is I went back and Omni Logistics board wrote kind of an open letter to the shareholders of Forward Air back like in November, justifying why this needed to happen. So anytime you start a relationship off and having to justify what you're doing, whenever you're a board going to shareholders, that equals hostile takeover type of thing or desperation. Again, in my opinion, that holy shit, this gig's not going to work. We need to pull on the heartstrings of the Omni shareholders. So just kind of weird. I feel a little bit bad. You know, when I was in the freight forwarding world, Forward Air was a powerhouse. They knew what they're doing, and it just seems, I don't know, man. I don't know how this is going to go. I could see it just kind of spiraling down the drain, and then they just get bought by somebody else and maybe get pieced out for assets. I don't know. What's your take on it? It's been in the news quite a bit lately.
Yeah, when you were talking about like a service provider who also is a service provider to both sides, it's really reminiscent of what I'm seeing as a struggle by very large ocean carriers to get themselves into the freight forwarding game. So there's something similar to it, right? Where you've got the Maersks and the CMAs of the world and these large ocean carriers who also have massive forwarding wings that have mostly been created through acquisitions of historically large freight forwarders who are now in a similar situation where you have the consumers of freight forwarding services saying, but I'm using one carrier. And are you only going to give me one carrier as an option to use? Are you always going to give it to the parent company's carriers? You know, this doesn't seem like you have my best interest in mind. And if they do or not, who knows, right? I'm not here to pass judgment on that, but you can understand where the skepticism would come from. The other side of it is, man, things are tough all over right now. You know, I hear every day, I hear of another friend of mine is like, hey, can you talk to this friend of mine who got laid off at XYZ company? They're really good. Is there something you guys could do for them? You know, it just seems to be that right now, even with all the pressures that are currently happening to our industry, which are affecting price, it doesn't appear to be helping to expand the roles of people working there. If anything, every day I'm hearing about more and more layoffs. So I put those two things together, and you look at this kind of a merger and acquisition, timing is just not real good right now to come out the other side of a merger that happened that had financial expectations that were probably based on some sort of a percentage of what was going on with the pandemic. It's not sure if it was the best decision, but
yeah, we'll see how that plays out. All right, Pete, I have no idea what you're going to talk about, so we'll see how this goes.
So yeah, I'm going to talk about two countries on my two topics today, and the first one is Libya. So Libya is really going through it, but their currency is practically worthless right now. And a big reason for that is not only the fact that there were so many sanctions and so many FCPA violations in Libya, but now there's a conversation that its central bank, its actual bank, was money laundering. They were taking in currencies from other parts of the world and laundering it through that bank. And there's another interesting conspiracy theory that the Russians flooded Libya with counterfeit currency in order to continue to lower the value of the currency, which made their oil more, less valuable, and their ability to sell it and make anything with it. You're also seeing Russian companies now going into Libya and looking for opportunities to buy up different parts of it. So this is a great conversation and an excellent illustration of how both inflation and deflation and currency adjustments can absolutely wreck a country. And I know we've talked in the past about the petrodollar and what that would mean to the U.S. if countries like Saudi Arabia stopped accepting payments in dollars. Imagine being a tiny country and more or less losing any ability to use your currency as a fiat currency and as an international means of transaction in an economy that's already on the ropes. So not good, Doug. And how the global economic world ends up reacting to this, I think, is not going to be as favorable as if it were another nation because it's Libya.
Yeah, interesting. Now the conspiracy theory. I don't know, right? It's always good to throw Russia in the mix because you just don't know what the hell's going on over there, or what Putin's happening. So it's always interesting when in doubt, insert Russia as the problem, right? I have no idea if that is true or not, but it's just funny how that comes about. And then, money laundering and inappropriate behavior from the central bank in Libya. I think that kind of thing goes on a hell of a lot more than we may realize, right? And I'm not saying specifically about banks and what you just spoke about, but I think the vision of democracy and everything that's going out there, and I know these countries are not democratic, but I think there's just a lot more crazy stuff going on if you peel the onion back in different countries that you and I may not realize. But the one thing that struck me on your comment, Pete, was that when in doubt, insert Russia to explain away what's going on. Maybe it's true. I don't know, but I don't know if it's going to be that big of a blip, right? There's a lot of big oil producers out there beyond Libya, but anyway, it's good to call out.
In the words of the great Van Halen, in their seminal, 92 video for Right Here, Right Now. Remember, it was basically just sayings on the bottom of it while they played the song.
Yeah.
Your government is probably doing things that you think other governments do that are abhorrent, right? So
yeah.
I don't like to think about it too much, but it wouldn't surprise me, Doug.
Yeah.
And yes, Russia is always the best villain. I mean, Drago and Rocky. Do I need to keep going?
Yeah, that's funny. So, the other thing, completely off topic, but we love to do this. You remember the NXS video? I can't remember the name of the song.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They just stood there and threw white cards onto the ground based on the lyrics.
Yeah, it was on a Kick album, and it was a play on a Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
Bob Dylan video. It was very good.
Yeah. No,
I love NXS. Absolutely love that band, and that's one of my go-tos for karaoke. Is What You Need.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one.
Keenan has no idea who we're talking about. I wish we could get a live shot of his face right now while we talk about NXS.
Yeah, good band.
Yeah, and Keenan, don't Google how the lead singer died. You don't want to know that. You're too young and impressionable.
Michael Hutchins.
That's right.
So, anyway, speaking of off topic, this is what we do every week during halftime: is just grab some interesting news that we may have read about or have a personal opinion about, and we just go to town. And it's brought to us by Cap Logistics. I always say thanks for giving us the platform to do this. It's always fun, and we appreciate the listeners. So check out caplogistics.com. And with that, Pete, let her rip, buddy. What's your halftime topic?
So my halftime topic is remakes. It's movie remakes, all right? So there's a ton of them, and either they're direct remakes, which is like a retelling of the same story, or we take we take a character. So this spring there was an abomination of a film called The Fall Guy, which was it was just terrible, Doug, and it really stomped on the memory of a great Lee Majors show from the 1980s that was fantastic. And then you have ones that aren't bad. Like I thought they were great, like Starsky and Hutch. I thought was a pretty fun movie. 21 Jump Street, pretty fun movie, But a lot of these remakes are stupid. So I'm gonna put something out there, right? You can Google this. The rumor is, James Bond, quote unquote, died in the last film. Mm-hmm. So the James Bond 007 died, and the buzz on the net, and it's everywhere, is they're going to start with the first book, right? The first book that was done by Ian Fleming, and remake them as in historical context. So redo like Dr. No like it's 1950, redo The Spy Who Loves Me like it's 1961, and make the movies in the period of the time the book was made. And I think that would be pretty badass. I mean, we were just talking about Russia being the bad guy. The espionage stuff that we had growing up in the 70s and the 80s, those movies, whether it was, Ludlum or Tom Clancy or Ian Fleming, these were fantastic books because they were about the time. They were about that time in the Cold War, and it made more sense. So I would love to see James Bond in a period Bentley in the 1950s or 60s, and going to Casino Royale when it was Monaco in the 1960s. I think that'd be pretty awesome. So I don't know, Doug, how do you feel about movie remakes and TV remakes? And has there ever been one you thought was fantastic?
Mm-hmm. So whenever I hear remakes, I equate that to lazy writers and producers that are looking for the fast buck, right? There's a few that, I wouldn't even call a remake because it's more of a series when you relate to James Bond. Maybe Fast and the Furious. I think they've done 9 of them. F9, I think, was the last one. But for the most part, they can get away with it on kids' movies, right? Because kids are crazy. And how many times whenever you're growing up did your daughter sing the same song 1,000 times or want to read the same book 1,000 times, right? So I kind of get that one. Star Wars was so overplayed they had to go back to the beginning and do.
I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to get angry. I don't want to talk about it.
So I'll leave it alone. I think it's lazy writers with lack of creativity. As far as I don't know, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but the challenge with going back to the 1950s and 60s of the James Bond is that I made my kids when they were in high school sit down and watch The Breakfast Club because that was impactful. You and I loved it. And probably 30 minutes in the movie, I look over and my daughter's on her phone and she's like, "Dad, this is so boring and so slow. I don't know what to think." So I don't know if the moviegoer in this day and age could handle the classic nature of going back to the 50s and 60s on a spy movie. I think it would just, I don't know. I like the concept, but you and I are north of 50, so maybe that's just us. But anyway, I was thinking when you spoke that Breakfast Club was an amazing movie, and my daughter could give 2 shits about it whenever she was watching it with me. And I made her watch it to the very end when Judd Nelson threw his hand up in the air on it as he walked off with the credits rolling. So,
yeah, you got to watch Bratz on Hulu, Doug.
I've seen it. Okay,
yeah,
cool. It's on Hulu, huh?
Yeah, it's excellent. It's excellent. Nice. Yeah. All right, Doug, what do you got for halftime?
Well, my take is about being stranded, right? And you may have seen that probably the mic drop of being stranded is the 2 astronauts that are in the International Space Station that are, for lack of a better term, stranded, where the Boeing ship that's supposed to take them back is having thruster problems or something of that nature. And they're doing a pretty good job of spinning it. Hey, we want to do more testing and we want to do more spacewalks. But if you peel back all the crap, they're kind of stuck up there, right? Will they get down? Absolutely. I feel very confident. But they're stuck, right? They're stuck in freaking space. And I read that and I'm like, you can spin this all you want, but the public knows there's some problem up there. It's not catastrophic. They'll figure it out. And I'm sure there's some ejection pod that worst case scenario. So my take on that is, have you ever, give me a scenario. I have Keenan's here of where you were stranded. What's the worst place you've been stranded? You tell me yours, I'll tell you mine, and I'll share with the audience Keenan's.
I was stranded in the Pune airport in India for 2 days. And it's not a big airport. It's maybe the size of like Manchester, New Hampshire airport. It's little. There's not a lot to do there, but sit there and ask yourself, why the hell am I in Pune? I could have driven to Delhi and back like 4 times as I waited there. But I was not there with an office in Pune at the time. I had gone to see customers. I'm not driving it myself. And I just ended up sitting there miserable. No Wi-Fi. I couldn't find a place to plug in my phone. It was it was pretty awful, man. Like sleeping in an airport overnight in India. And when I finally got on the plane, I don't think I've ever been happier to be on a plane, particularly Air India, which is, you're rolling the dice. I used to have a joke, Air India now with seats, Air India now with seatbelts. Yeah. Air India goes fly free. But it was awful, Doug. It was absolutely awful. What's yours and Keenan's?
So Keenan sent something this morning. So apparently he was driving through Minnesota. He didn't tell me how many years ago. And I was confused. I thought this was very recent. But middle of the night in the winter, -30 with the crazy winds that hail across the upper Midwest, trying to change a flat tire. So flat tire, middle of the night, winds blowing, -30, getting out there and trying to take care of it. So that was his stranded story. Mine is related to Moab, Utah, right? And if anybody's been to Moab, it's like you're on freaking Mars. There's no trees, there's no markers, there's a trail that you're supposed to follow. We were mountain biking, and it was crazy. Like, we got lost. We were on this mountain bike trail, and this is before cell phones and GPS and stuff. And you probably couldn't even get a signal out there. But we've been riding all day. Sun was going down. We didn't know where we were. The desert at night in Moab can be pretty crazy, and we were out of water. And we were like, what the hell are we going to do? So anyway, the crazy thing is that a mirage out of nowhere, basically this guy in a Jeep showed up, refilled our water, directed us to where we were supposed to go. And we were like 20 miles away from Moab. And we made it back, but it was dark. We had no lights on our bike, completely unprepared for what we were walking into. But I really thought, I'm like, I have no idea where I am. I can't see anything. I don't know what direction we're going. And that I felt stranded and a little bit panicked.
I think with every reason to, man, like a desert with no water, that's absolutely a worst case scenario.
Yeah. Pretty crazy. So good deal. Well, that was halftime, brought to us by Cap Logistics. We appreciate their support of the show. Visit caplogistics.com. So I think I may have flipped the script. Let me do mine real quick, because this is the second half of the mergers and acquisitions. And this is one that caught my attention. It was in the news yesterday or over the weekend, where RXO is going to purchase Coyote from UPS, the truck brokerage division, for like $1 billion, right? And a couple of things there. UPS bought that company in 2015 for $1.8 billion. So think about the good deal that RXO has picked up on that. And I saw the CEO being interviewed about this, and basically the gist that I gathered was, hey, you got to strike oftentimes in a down market. So they did that. They got a good deal on Coyote. So that's number one. Number two, he indicated the bigger the brokerage, scale brings stability and volume and revenue. And so RXO went from the 7th largest truck broker to the 3rd largest with that acquisition. So better purchasing power. And then the thing I thought of is that XPO exploded with Brad Jacobs' concept of growth by acquisition, and then he spun it all down and then left a billionaire. So I was like, okay, well, this has happened. RXO was spun off. They kind of understand how to do M&A. And the other thing is that, UPS is another example of going back to core competency, which is parcel delivery. They sold their LTL division, I think, in 21, the T-Force up in Canada. That was pretty smooth for both parties. I think this is going to be pretty smooth for both parties. So RXO has the pedigree with XPO, with understanding the benefits of mergers and acquisitions. And I got to give UPS some credit, man. They're laser focused on their core competency was get rid of the noise, get rid of the baggage, non-core business, and let's go back to delivering parcels and doing a really good job at that. So I think that one is going to be pretty smooth. We're not going to hear a lot about it. And I think both of those parties are winners in the acquisition. So the first one was a little bit troubled. The second one, I think, is going to play out just nicely for both.
Well, I love what you said there about how size and purchase power matters. There's something to be said for buying in a down-ish market, right?
Yeah.
And having all that volume when it comes back. It's going to come back. And when it does, having the purchase power as well as those customers where maybe the margins aren't as big as you want them to be, this business is going to come back. And when it does, being able to maintain those volumes is going to pay off in the bottom line. So this is probably a good time to have made that decision. And like you said, UPS is walking away with a bag of money. So it seems like a winner all around, dude.
Yeah, cool. All right, bring us home. What's your second topic?
Well, more bad news for one particular country. We were talking about oil states earlier. Venezuela is at the point now where they used to be a nation that was, they would explore and they would drill about 3 million barrels a day. And that's nothing to sneeze at. It's a significant amount. They're down below about 720,000 barrels a day right now, and it's dropping further. One of the reasons for that apparently is that large companies like Chevron are moving back out. And this has to do with American sanctions. So the U.S. had sanctioned Venezuela. And when they did that, a lot of companies took their exploration out. They couldn't do business in Venezuela. We told Venezuela, if you have free and fair elections, we'll let these companies come back in. Well, surprise, surprise, it's not happening. So now these sanctions are coming back and Western companies are taking exploration back out of Venezuela again. This is not good for that country. And, a simple math equation here points out just how fast Venezuela's entire economy could collapse if this continues to be the case. And they've never really been on sure footing. So, Doug, as these sanctions go back into place, I think you're going to find incredible instability in Venezuela. And unfortunately, where Venezuela has instability, the rest of South America does as well.
Yeah.
So we'll see if I'm right on that one.
Yeah. I guess just the thing that pops in my head on this one is that I guess sanctions work, right? Yeah, you always talk about, we're going to sanction this country because of what they did, tit for tat. And obviously this has worked. Now, I don't know if the concept is just destroy an economy and a country, but it sounds like that's pretty much what's happening, right? I mean, like you said, the volume has gone down. It's not as significant as before. Production and exploration here in the United States is at an all-time high. So sanctions worked, but I don't know if the intent is to destroy a country, right? Which potentially could happen as things progress. When you have all your eggs in one basket, like Venezuela does, and big countries are basically saying we're pulling out, and all the investment beyond just drilling, the indirect jobs and support that comes along with that. So I don't know. It could be pretty catastrophic for Venezuela. So anyway, that's a good take. I didn't know about that.
We'll see if I'm right in a year or so, Doug.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right. Well, that wraps us up. Both of us.
Yeah.
What's that?
I get to close the show, Doug, because you opened it.
No, you opened it.
I opened the show. I'm turning into you, Doug.
I know. We joke back and forth like who's doing what. So, but it's early in the morning for all of us, and early, late on the space station, Salt Lake City, Fresno. We're here for you. We bring great topics every week. I'm excited every week, Pete, to sit down with you and banter back and forth. And I can't thank our listeners enough. Whether it's global trade, whether it's transportation, logistics. If it's happening now, we're going to put a forward spin on it. We're going to give you our take, and we thank you for listening to us every week. So I think that's it. Who knows where we're going to be next week, Pete? And thanks for jumping in.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Keena. Thanks, everybody. And I guess we'll see you next week.
You got it. All right. Take care, everybody.